Good morning children. Welcome to the next class of botany. In today's class we are going to study about the parts of the flower. As we know in a flower we can classify the parts of the flower into four walls. The outermost wall is called the calyx. Next the corolla. Next comes the third wall, that is the androecium, and the fourth wall gynoecium. So these four walls they can be broadly classified under two categories. They are the accessory organs and the essential organs. Accessory organs means helping organs or supporting organs. So in a flower, the accessory organs they are the calyx and the corolla. Whereas the androecium and gynoecium they are said to be the essential walls or the essential organs, as they are involved in the process of reproduction. So here first let's study about the accessory organs of the flower. First, these accessory organs we are going to study under few headings. First one, we are going to study about the arrangement of the walls. So position of the perianth. Okay, now this word perianth we use when the sepals and the petals they are not differentiated. In a flower only one accessory wall is present. Instead of calyx and corolla, only one accessory wall is present there. Then we could use the word perianth. So position of perianth, so that is it can be sepals, petals or the tepals. So here as I told you, sepals, the group of sepals they form the calyx, group of petals they form the corolla. If the sepals and petals are not there, there is a wall is present, that is called the perianth, and this perianth is made up of tepals. So these parts relative to one another is called as the perianth arrangement. So their arrangement, the sepals, petals or tepals arrangement we are going to study here. So they can be, this arrangement can be in three ways: cyclic, acyclic, spirocyclic or hemicyclic. So what is cyclic? All the floral parts are arranged in a definite walls. As we have studied, four walls are there. Each wall has different members. That is calyx, the outermost wall is made up of sepals. Corolla, the made up of petals. So here each walls, the floral parts of each walls, they are arranged in definite pattern. Then it is called as a cyclic or walled. Example you can find in brassica. Next is the acyclic or spiral. The floral parts are arranged in spirals or on an elongated fleshy torus. Example magnolia. So acyclic or spiral, the floral parts they are arranged in a spiral form. Okay, the floral parts they are arranged in a spiral form, then it is called as acyclic or spiral. Spirocyclic or hemicyclic. Some parts are in walls and other parts are in spirals, then we call it as spirocyclic. That is, in some walls the floral parts they may be arranged in the form of wall, that is in a cyclic pattern, and in some it will be arranged in the form of spiral pattern, spring like, then we call it as spirocyclic. So this is what we have studied in the arrangement of walls. Next we are going to study the outermost wall, that is the calyx. Calyx protects the flower in bud stage. So the function of calyx is it protects the flower in a bud stage. It is the outermost wall of flower, and unit of calyx is sepal. That is, the calyx is made up of group of sepals. Normally they are green in color. So usually the sepals you can find they are green in color. So here you can see in this diagram, you can see this is the sepal. Okay, this is a sepal. So the group of sepals that is called as the calyx. So here the fusion of so that is we are going to study next about the calyx arrangement. So here fusion. So based on the whether these sepals they are joined together or they are free, they are classified into two types: aposepalous and synsepalous. Aposepalous means when the word apo refers to free. When these sepals, they are free or they are distinct, they are free from each other. Just you can imagine all in the palm, the fingers you can imagine. All the fingers when they are separate, then we call it as aposepalous. Example you can find in brassica, annona, etc. Syncephalus, when all the sepals they are fused together, they are joined together. All the sepals they are joined together, then it is called as syncephalus. So as we know, the calyx is made up of sepals based on whether these sepals they are free or whether they are fused. They are classified into two types, aposepalous or syncephalous. When all the petals they are free from each other, then we call it as aposepalous, or the other term for aposepalous is polysepalous. If these sepals they are fused together, they are united, then we call it as syncephalous. This you can find in the case of the hibiscus. Next, duration of the calyx. For how long this calyx is present in the flower, that we are going to study next. What is the green part of the brinjal fruit? All of you have seen in the brinjal. In the brinjal you can find a green structure which is present along with the fruit. That is nothing but the calyx itself. Have you seen similar to this in any other fruits? Some other fruits also we can find this. In most of the fruits they lack that. So here, based on the duration of the floral parts, how long this calyx is present in the fruit, based on that, or during the flower development, opening of the flower, how long this calyx is present, based on that we classify them into four types. First one is the caducous type or fugacious calyx. So calyx that withers or falls off during the early development stage of flower, that is before the flower opens. Okay, fully the flower development is taking place, fully the petals are open, the androecium and gynoecium are fully developed. Before that, when the calyx they shed down, they fall down, then it is called as caducous. This example you can find in pepper. Here you can find here in this is the calyx. Okay, this is the calyx. Now when the flower has bloomed, you can find the calyx is not there. Okay, so that is before the opening of the flower, the calyx has shed down. This we call it as caducus. Next one is the deciduous. Calyx that falls soon after the opening of the flower, that it is called as the caducus type. So here the calyx remain till the opening of the flower. Once the flower is open, the calyx will shed down. Then it is called as the deciduous types. Example here it is the nilambo. The next type is the persistent. Calyx that persists and continues to be along with the fruit and forms a cup at the base of the fruit is called as persistent. This you have seen in brinjal. In brinjal, in the top you can find a green fleshy layer is present there. That layer is called as the nothing but the calyx. That is along with the fruit, even till the fruit development, the calyx remains. Then it is called as persistent. Next type is the acrescent. Acrescent, calyx that is persistent, grows along with the fruit and encloses the fruit either completely or partially. So here you can see, here the calyx, it grows along with the fruit. When the development of the fruit is taking place, the calyx also grows, and the calyx, it encloses the fruit within it. Inside this you can find the calyx in the fruit is present. Then it is called as the accrescent. So here you can see this is in the brinjal. Here you can find the calyx is present on the top, forming a cup-like structure. This is the persistent type. Okay, here the development of the calyx is not taking place along with the fruit. The calyx is not growing along with the fruit. But in accrescent, the calyx also grows along with the fruit and it encloses the fruit within it. Then it is called as the accrescent. So based on the duration of the calyx, we have studied four types. They are caducous, deciduous, persistent and accrescent. Next we are going to study about the shapes of calyx. Now here you can find in hibiscus. So as we can see in hibiscus, you might have seen the structure here, a bell-shaped structure. Okay, in some plant, the shape of the calyx is in the bell shape. Now before that I will just explain. Now here you can find these are the sepals. There are 5 sepals. Now these sepals, they are joined together. As a result, we are getting a cup-like structure. So the term we will use here, it is what? Syncepalus. Okay, since all the sepals are joined together, we will use the term syncepalus. Since the sepals are joined, they are giving a cup-like structure. This we call it as campanulate. The structure we call it as the campanulate. When the calyx, they fuse together and form a urn-shaped structure, a pot-like structure, it is called as auriculate. In Datura you can find, that is the calyx, they form a tube-like structure. It's an elongated tube-like structure. This we call it as the tubular. So here shapes of calyx. So it is bell-shaped. Then it is called as campanulate, as we have studied here. This we can find in the hibiscus. The fruiting calyx is urn-shaped, urn or pot-shaped in Withania, and it is called as auriculate. In Datura, calyx is tube-like and it is known as tubular. Two-lipped calyx is present in Ocimum. That is, the calyx, they form 2 layers. Okay, they are called the 2 lips. So then it is called as the, and then you can find it in Ocimum. Sometimes calyx is colored and they are called as the petaloid. Okay, so here the calyx, as we have studied, usually the calyx, they are green in color. In some plants, this calyx, they become colored. Then it is called as petaloid. As we know, the petals in a flower, they are brightly colored. Since here the calyx is also colored, we use the term petaloid. Example in Saraka and Musenda. Now this is the Musenda plant, you might have seen here. And this is the calyx. Okay, it is white in color. This is the calyx. Okay, so here since it is colored, we call it as a petaloid. Next in Tridex. Tridex, you might have seen a common thing. This one you have seen during the summer season. We commonly called as the Tata Mudi. So you might have seen this during the summer season, the white hair-like structure flying in the air. This is nothing but the Tridex. The seed, this is the seed of the Tridex. This is the calyx. The calyx, it is in the form of hair-like structure. This modified hair-like structure, they are called the pappus. So in Tridex, calyx is modified into hair-like structure and this is called the pappus. So here you can find this is the seed. The seed is supported with the help of a persistent hair-like structure, that is the calyx, and this is called as the pappus. So this is what we have studied about the calyx. Next we are going to study about the next accessory wall, that is the corolla. So corolla is the most attractive part in majority of the flowers and is usually brightly colored. Corolla helps to display the flower and attract the pollinators. So the function is what? To expose the flower as well as to attract the insects for pollination. Similarly, based on whether these petals they are fused together or they are free, before that I'll explain. That is, this corolla, it is made up of group of petals. Okay, the group of petals, they form the corolla. Clear? Next, so based on the fusion, we classify them again into 2 types. Epo, as we have studied, when all the petals they are free, as you can find in hibiscus. All of you have seen 5-petaled hibiscus. 5 petals they are free from each other. Then we call it as apopetalous or we call it as polypetalous. Next, Simpetalus, when the petals they are fused together, then we call it as Simpetalus or Gamopetalus. This you can find in Datura flower. In Datura flower, all the petals they are fused together to form a funnel-like structure. So then it is called as Simpetalus. So when the petals are free, we call it as apopetalous or polypetalous. When the petals they are fused, we call it as Simpetalus or Gamopetalus. Next we will study about the perianth. Now here, perianth, as we have studied in a flower, usually there are 4 walls, calyx and corolla, the accessory outermost. In some plants, this calyx and corolla is not present. Instead, only one wall is present around the essential organs, that is the antecium and the gynoecium. Then it is called as the homoclamides. or undifferentiated calyx and corolla in a flower, that is called as perianth. Homochlamydous means there is no differentiation of calyx and corolla, only one wall is present, that is called the perianth. Each member is called as the tepal. So this perianth is made up of group of tepals. If the tepals are distinct, that is they are free from each other, they are called as apotepalous or polyphylous. Example in Allium sativum, that is in the garlic. When the fused tepals are, then we call it as syntepalous or gamophilous. Example Allium cipum, that is in the onion. So here we have studied in some plants the calyx and corolla, they are undifferentiated, then that wall is called as the perianth. Okay, this perianth is made up of tepals. If the tepals are free, we call it as apotepalous. If the tepals are fused together, we call it as syntepalous. In some species, the perianth, they are reduced to a scale-like structure. Then it is called as the Lordicle. This Lordicle you can find in the Poaceae, that is in the grass family you can find it. Next you are going to study about the aestivation, a very important topic children, aestivation. Now what is this aestivation? The arrangement of sepals and petals in flower bud is said to be aestivation. So what is aestivation? The arrangement of the sepals and petals in a flower is said to be an aestivation. So here you can understand this by this diagram. Diagrammatic representation, it will be clear for you. Now here there are 5 types of aestivations you are going to study. First one, valvate. So here we have studied aestivation means the arrangement of the sepals or the petals. When the sepals, now this represents a petal, okay, or again here it is, this shape is usually very used for drawing the petals. So when the sepals or petals, they are arranged in such a way, that is the margin, the edges of the sepals, they remain in touch with the neighboring sepals or petals, but they do not overlap, then it is called as valvate aestivation. So what is valvate aestivation? The sepals, the margin of the sepals, they do not overlap, they remain side by side, then it is called as valvate aestivation. Next here you can see in this the margins, they are overlapped and overlapping. Now this end we will call it as overlapping. This end of this sepal, if we say, we'll say this as overlapping, and this end of the sepal will say it is overlapped. Okay, it is covered by another sepal or petal. So here when the sepals, the margins of the sepals and petals, they are overlapping or overlapped, this is overlapping, this is overlapped arrangement, then we'll call it as twisted aestivation. So here one margin of each petal or sepal, they are overlapping on the other sepal or petal, then we'll call it as twisted. Next type is here imbricate aestivation. Imbricate aestivations, the sepals and petals, they irregularly overlap on each other. So here you can find, now this sepal or petal, it is completely outside, both the ends margins, they are completely outside, okay, and this one you can see it is completely inside, the margins, both the margins, they are completely inside, okay, here, and the remaining, this is one end is overlapping, the other one is overlapped, overlapping, overlapped, similarly overlapping, overlapped, that is it is showing the twisted, that is one sepal or petal is completely outside, one sepal or petal is completely inside, the remaining they show the twisted, then this is called as the imbricate aestivation, and this type of arrangement is called as imbricate aestivation. Next is what, the quinquential. In quinquential is also similar to imbricate. Now here two sepals, they are sepals or petals, they are completely outside, and two sepals or petals, they are completely inside, and one shows the twisted aestivation, then this is called as the quinquential. So here two sepals or petals, they are completely outside, two completely inside, and one is showing the twisted arrangement, then it is called as quinquential. Okay, And the last type of aestivation is the vexillary aestivation. Here, one sepal or petal is very large and it is overlapping the others. Okay, and the two side, the lateral one, they are showing the twisted aestivation, and the two sepal or petal, they are completely inside. Then this is called as the vexillary aestivation. Okay, so here we have studied aestivation. There are of 5 types. Valvate, when the sepals or the margins of the sepals or petals, they are not overlapping, we will call it as valvate. In twisted, margins of the sepals or petals, they are overlapping, then we will call it as twisted. In imbricate, one sepal is completely outside, one is completely inside, and the remaining they show the twisted, we call it as imbricate. In quinquential, two sepals or petals are completely outside, two sepals or petals are completely inside, and one shows the twisted aestivation, then we call it as quinquential. In vexillary, one sepal or petal is larger, encloses the other one, other sepals or petals. The two lateral one, they show the twisted aestivation, and the two innermost sepals or petals, they show the completely they are inside. Then this is called as the vexillary aestivation. So hope you have understood the aestivation. Thank you, children.